Hi guys, how you doing? We will start the webinar in a couple of minutes, so sit tight for now. Thank you. Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Peter Hunt. I'm the Head of Marketing here at Action Point, and we're delighted to bring you our latest Windows Virtual Desktop webinar. The webinar title is Desktop as a Service, a single solution for remote access, business continuity, and security challenges. And I guess the reason why we're bringing you this content is I guess we're living in a remote working environment, but now more so a hybrid working environment. And Windows Virtual Desktop is really one of those solutions that's really enabling IT managers and businesses alike to better power their staff across their organization. Um, I'm just going to go through a little bit of housekeeping. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, just hit stick them in the questions box on your GoToWebinar control panel there. And we'll endeavour to get to as many questions as possible as we finish up the webinar. If you're having any issues at all, just leave something, leave us a comment in the webinar as well, and I'll try and get to you. I'm just going to introduce my colleague and the speaker for today, Finney Nally. So Finney Nally is our head of Microsoft Cloud Solutions here at Action Point. He's been working in the IT industry for the last 15 years, and his role at Action Point encompasses the full Microsoft stack across Azure, Modern Workplace, and Windows Virtual Desktop. So he's very well positioned to talk on today's topic. And before I hand over to Finian, I'm just going to launch a quick poll, and the poll will just give us some data and feedback, which will be useful in the Q&A later on. So just to launch the poll, I suppose with regard to remote working, so if you want to look at it in this context, what are your end users saying about their experience working from home? So what are your end users saying about their experience working from home? There's 5 choices there, pick one. I cannot access all the system/applications I need. I cannot access the files I need to do my job. I regularly have to contact IT support for assistance. Everything is slow and it's hard to connect. And finally, I have security concerns while working from home. So again, look at it from your user perspective and kind of give us the feedback on that poll. So I'll leave it up there for another 30 or 45 seconds. And in that time, I'm going to hand over to Finney and Ali. Finney, if you'd like to take the ropes there.
Great, Peter. Thanks very much for that intro. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us on today's webinar. As Peter said, we're going to spend the next half an hour to 45 minutes going through the deck, and we'll do an interactive demo as well. But any questions you have, any queries you have, please put them in the questions box throughout. So the agenda for today, we're going to go over a few things. Number one, what are the challenges that we're seeing out there? And some of these challenges certainly aren't new, but they certainly have been exacerbated over the last number of months. And really we're seeing that these aren't short-term challenges, they're going to continue on into the future. We're going to dive into Windows Virtual Desktop, give a quick overview. We're going to talk specifically about some key scenarios that Windows Virtual Desktop addresses. We'll then look at a demo, and then we'll also get a little bit more technical, and we'll try and get under the hood, what makes Windows Virtual Desktop so great, and we'll aim to answer your questions at the end. So I suppose in thinking about us as business owners or as IT professionals, fundamentally, we're trying to address a very, very simple problem within our organization. We're trying to deliver apps and data to the various departments in a simple fashion to make them be productive, to let them do their job. It all sounds very simple and looks very simple, but really when we look at our environments today, often we see something completely different, and the ability to deliver that is compromised. Where our systems are built on platforms that are just good enough. We have an awful lot of legacy software, legacy backend systems, legacy approaches towards working. Our technology strategy has a question mark over it, or even if it was relatively positive, our overall technology strategy has probably been blown out of the water over the last few months. And as well as that, the existing fragmentation in our business and in our IT operations has been further compounded by further fragmentation about remote workers, about shadow IT being introduced, and various other aspects. So although we've got a very, very simple problem, the ability for us to solve that is dramatically compounded by our current platform, our existing technology. And for many of us, we've had to deliver remote working in almost 60 seconds in a very, very rapid fashion. And what we've seen over the past, back to March of this year, there was almost 2 ways of looking at remote working. One was from businesses who simply had never worked remotely before. And the approach to remote working was, well, let's get a load of devices, be it laptops, etc. Let's set up VPNs, and great, we have now enabled remote access for our end users. Ultimately, the experience wasn't great for the end users. Other scenarios we've seen is that businesses have had some level of remote access, but there was never a scenario where they envisaged 100% remote working, where all users would be at home. And similarly, in that scenario, a lot of new devices have been purchased, VPNs have been set up, even to the extent of additional on-premise infrastructure has been purchased. We've ticked a box for remote access, but we haven't really addressed true productivity and true remote working. Because fundamentally, remote working is pretty much business as usual now. And the reason we say that is, as we've spoken to businesses and I suppose surveyed many end users over the last number of months, what we found is that the attitude and the approach to remote working has completely changed. Most members of staff now want to work at home, a number of days a week, or in some cases full-time. They want to eliminate that daily commute. In our surveys to people, we found that the average commute ranged from 5 hours a week to 15 hours a week. So that's 5 to 15 hours a week that people had lost, and they're looking at this in I suppose, a new way of working and say, well, actually, I no longer want to go back to a world where I'm losing 5 to 15 hours of my week just by sitting in the car because I have to go to an office, when I know I can actually be just as productive at home. So in delivering remote working, or this new way of working, we actually need to up our game. Good enough is actually no longer good enough. We need to be doing things much, much better. And we need to consider a few key things. So first and foremost, the end user experience. And it's something that was very much forgotten when we had to enable our remote working within 60 seconds. We have to eliminate things like a cumbersome connection process. we have to make it similar to, we have to make it like for like, whether we're working in the office or whether we're working from home. Those slow applications and those slow files to open have to be eliminated, and all those performance issues should be non-existent. I want the same experience. If we think of our end user expectation, if an end user is at home, they're using consumer products, consumer solutions. They're using Netflix, they're using WhatsApp to text and video call. They're using things like RTE Player to access stuff on demand. There's an expectation there that things are always on, that they're easy to use. But the expectation from our business point of view and the business tools and applications that we're delivering to our end users is completely different. We're seeing that poor end user experience. We're seeing that poor performance. So end user expectation versus the actual reality are very, very different. So really, we need to up our game and start delivering a much, much better end user experience to say, well, actually, we really don't care where you are anymore, regardless whether you're in their office or working from home or what device you're working on. But we know you're going to get the same quality of experience throughout, regardless of your location or device. In addition, the business is very cognizant of IT security. And again, going back to the scenario in March where we had to rapidly enable remote working, security was pretty much forgotten about for an awful lot of solutions. Or the approach to security was, well, we have a VPN, therefore we are secure. The reality is a lot of the fundamentals around security were completely ignored. Multi-factor authentication wasn't enabled. The reality of people's home network and what else was going on in those home networks. And going back to that end user experience piece, because the performance of our applications and the way we delivered that remote working experience to the end users were so fundamentally flawed, the volume of shadow IT, of new applications sourced and used by the end users outside of the governance of our corporate network has dramatically increased. So we've created a whole new risk profile that we need to be cognizant of and we need to start to address. We can no longer have the attitude that the four walls of our office are safe and that's where we're going to operate in, because our staff simply don't want that expectation anymore. They want to work remotely. Likewise, scale. Scale is something that we've seen certainly over the last 3 weeks, and I suppose it's something that we have a continuous conversation with clients on. In other words, when people are investing in IT, how do you predict the scale? How do you predict to where the business is going in the future? We are a business of 200 staff right now. We predict that in 3 years, we're going to go to 300 staff, when the reality could be completely different. We could scale back down to 100 staff, or we could merge with a business and another few businesses and become an organization of 1,000 staff. It's very, very difficult to predict scale. So when something like COVID-19 and the reality of remote working came into the picture, the expectation of our ability to scale completely changed. We realized that on-premise we've so many different single points of failure between firewalls, VPN solutions, and gradually our cost has increased. It's gone from a small cost to scale to actually being a much, much larger cost. And often a lot of that cost is not tangible. While we have some levels of infrastructure cost and CapEx expense, what we're actually seeing in reality is that the IT overhead now has dramatically increased. So it's further, I suppose, hamstringing or disabling the IT person's ability to actually think about new solutions, think about better ways of working, think about improvements, because they're spending their time on the phone to the end user going, I'm going to reset your password, or I'm going to try and fix your connection, or do you know what, we actually can't make it better. That's just the way it is. So how do we introduce in this new world easily scalable and on-demand solution? I suppose when we look back with the benefit of hindsight, we probably considered a lot of different things, be it SaaS solutions, be it RDS solutions or VDI solutions. And I suppose the reality of them was that often they had a very, very long lead time to set up. They were extremely expensive. They had limited flexibility, and we had to build in that scale from the start. And when we factored all that in and brought in the level of management and configuration oversight, matched that to an actual dollar value, the level of cost versus the level of benefit weren't on par. So it was safe to say we were never going to adopt those approaches. So hence we find ourselves in the position we are in today. So introducing Windows Virtual Desktop, we would argue it's the solution that addresses many of those challenges that I highlighted a few moments ago. It is, I suppose, the only Windows 10 solution, or the only multi-session Windows 10 solution delivered in the cloud. All of my applications, all of my data, all of my desktops together in one place, which allows me to deliver the same experience, the same secure experience to all of my users, regardless of where they are. It allows me to eliminate legacy VPN and on-premise resources. It allows me to have an application level experience or a full desktop experience. And always security is built in from the foundations and not added on. The beauty of it is it's allowing me to come in from the platform of my choice, be it that I'm on a Windows device, a Mac device, an Android tablet, an iPhone, whatever device I'm coming in. My experience is the same. So if I'm running my CRM system or my accounts package on my tablet or in my laptop from home, it's the exact same experience as it is when I'm sitting in the office running the exact same application. The technology is able to dramatically scale and change and understand what device I'm coming in from, understand what bandwidth levels I'm coming in from, and dynamically adapt the bandwidth to my utilization. It's also able to do really, I suppose, enhanced levels of remote delivery in terms of containerizing user profiles, containerizing applications, and I'll talk about them in a little bit more detail later on. So fundamentally, a quick snapshot, it's given me the same experience. It's given me all of those applications and all of my data together in one place at one time. And in the demo, I'll dive into that in a little bit more detail. So some of the key scenarios, why would we want to use Windows Virtual Desktop? What's the real benefit? Talk to me about some of the scenarios that actually happen in reality. The first one we see, I suppose, is around legacy applications, legacy application management. So I have an application that once every month or once every 6 months, the vendor sends me down an updated version of it, and I have to go upgrade the back-end systems. I have to flag downtime to my end users, and I have to push out that update. And 50% of the time when I do that, maybe it doesn't work for the first time. Maybe I have to do some level of backup and restore procedure on the database. Some users give me feedback that the application isn't performing well on their devices because they're using older desktops or older laptops, and maybe certain other features have stopped working. Maybe we had some integration, some plugins or something like that. So the overhead from an IT point of view, and as well as the overhead from an end user point of view, is actually quite high in terms of that continuous fat application upgrade process. With Windows Virtual Desktop, we can completely eliminate that. We can say, well, actually, do you know what? We're going to upgrade in a sandbox mode. We're going to test among a small pool of users, and we're going to push out gradually. And when the image is ready, when that application is ready, we'll push out to all users. So it gives us that ability to roll out applications, to update applications very, very dynamically, to give users different versions of the same application at the same time, and eliminate a lot of those previous headaches. And as well as that, if we think about the end user device, often the feedback was, the performance of my device has dropped since you upgraded that application. That no longer exists because the application is no longer sitting on the end user device. It's sitting in the Windows Virtual Desktop solution, meaning we can deliver it wherever we want, whenever we want, regardless of the device spec. Legacy applications is also another one that we see on a regular basis. The business invested in an application, maybe it was gone back 5-10 years ago, maybe it was a custom application, or maybe it's by a vendor that no longer exists or we're no longer paying support to. That application is very sensitive. We don't want to rock the boat too much with it, but we're really struggling to deliver that application to new users, and to scale it out to additional users, to give it more resources, and to actually deliver it to our end users. With Windows Virtual Desktop, we can actually take that application, put it in the cloud on its own dedicated virtual machine or virtual machines, and easily deliver that to our end users, regardless of where they are, be it that they're end users on-premise, using existing on-premise resources, existing on-premise applications. We can say, well, actually, we have these few legacy apps. We're going to move them to Windows Virtual Desktop, and this is how we're going to deliver them to our end users, because we know we can scale that application up and down very, very easy, leveraging the power of Windows Virtual Desktop. All our other applications, we're still happy that they're going to sit on premise and still work away as normal. But now we've just introduced a lot more flexibility and a lot more security into the same solution. And as well as that, the challenge of delivering that consistent end user experience. How do we make sure that my experience, not only from a performance point of view, but also in terms of how my application actually works, how do we make sure that that is common throughout, be it that I'm on my desktop, that I'm on my laptop, regardless of what device I'm on. So Windows Virtual Desktop delivers that consistent experience because it is Windows 10. It's Windows 10 regardless of which device I'm on. It doesn't make any difference that I'm coming in from a tablet, an Android tablet, iPhone, Linux device, whatever the case may be. One of the last key scenarios that I want to touch on is around business continuity. And when we have a conversation with a lot of people around business continuity, often the conversation immediately veers over to disaster recovery. And the answer becomes, yes, we have a disaster recovery plan. but 9 times out of 10, we don't have a business continuity plan. So what happens when your DR plan is invoked, or how does your DR plan actually adapt to real scenarios? So for example, COVID-19 was a genuine business continuity scenario. Nothing had happened to our infrastructure, our servers were still fine, everything was operating as normal. We didn't need to fail over to a secondary site. However, our office was no longer usable. People could no longer come into our office and use our systems attached to our local area network and attached to our back-end systems. They were all working from home. So how do they connect in? The challenge of the VPN was reintroduced. We had no real business continuity solution. What Windows Virtual Desktop allows us to do in combination with a good DR plan, it allows us to say, well, actually, we can have a Windows Virtual Desktop environment on standby, ready for action. When we need to invoke our DR plan, at the same time, we can invoke our business continuity plan. Maybe we need to fail over our servers, maybe we need to fail over some individual applications, but our end users, they connect into the Windows Virtual Desktop environment. That's their environment that they connect to. So it means if we don't have access to the office, or an end user doesn't have access to their normal business device, we can easily deploy new devices, or a user can get access to something like a home device and still have that same quality experience, while at the same time being secure and reducing the level of risk. Windows Virtual Desktop opens up a whole load of other scenarios. Some of the examples we've seen in the conversations we're having today are around, I suppose, specific industries, be it financial services or healthcare, where there's a lot of sensitive data, and we don't want that data, we don't want those applications going out into the wide world. However, we still need our end users to work remotely. Elastic workforce is another big conversation that we see, especially over the last couple of weeks, in terms of businesses scaling up to say, well, actually, we are going back to work now, but we've realized we have an opportunity to scale up. And on the flip side of that, businesses who are scaling down to say, well, actually, do you know what? It's no longer practical for us to operate with this many members of staff. We simply don't need them. How can we scale back dynamically? And Windows Virtual Desktop allows us to do that. It also allows us to deliver specialized applications to key people. Maybe they have some 3D rendering software. Maybe they have some, financial modeling software that they need access to. So Windows Virtual Desktop allows us to dynamically deliver those apps when and where those end user needs them. Again, moving away from that scenario to say, well, I need to have a dedicated high performance device for this end user that they have to go to and sit at their desk and use, and that's the only way they can use this software. We're now saying, actually, it doesn't matter what device you're coming in on, we can still give you that application with that same level of performance guaranteed. So we've considered some of the scenarios there, so let's see it in action. Let's see what actually Windows Virtual Desktop does. And I suppose the way I'm going to present this is maybe thinking about two key scenarios. So the first scenario is maybe we have a finance team that has had to scale up. We need to bring in some extra resources, and we've hired in a few contractors to help us process invoicing or help us do some other kind of work. We need to bolster our payroll because we're on the wage subsidy scheme and we have some extra challenges around payroll. So we're bringing in extra resources, but naturally they can't come into our office. Maybe they're in different locations, but we still need to give them access to key line of business applications, our payroll system, our account system. Maybe they need to see some timesheets. So how do we do that? How do we actually give them access, secure access to our system, give them a quality access to the system, but give them a familiar experience? At the end of the day, that person or that individual is probably used to going, right, I sit at a Windows 10 desktop, I have my applications, I really don't want anything outside of that, or else it's going to be difficult for me to do my job. So we have our Windows Virtual Desktop experience here, and I can deliver it in two fashions. First is I have my applications here, so I can click on my apps as normal. Next, I can double click on my Windows 10 desktop and get a full-blown Windows 10 desktop ready for me. Same applications, everything I need when I need it. So be it my Outlook, be it my Microsoft Teams, be it my file access, I can easily get access to these things whenever I need them. So as you can see here, full access, standard network share, everything working away as normal. So from an end user experience point of view, the end user doesn't have to worry about, am I in the cloud? Am I not in the cloud? Am I, working on a SaaS-based application? Am I working on some different application? Is this different to the way I normally work? It isn't, is the reality. It's the same. They're getting that same experience of all their desktop, their network share. Again, thinking of that scenario of, well, it's an extra resource on the finance team. Do you know what? They need to look at the end of year plan. Great, they have access to that data. They can look at the end of year plan. They can run things in Excel here as normal, or in our accounts package or in whatever system, because we've given them all those applications. But that end user is working from home, working from some other office. They're working on a device that actually doesn't have those files locally on it or doesn't have anything else on it. So we're giving them that same consistent experience. The other scenario I want to talk about is where we deliver certain key apps to businesses. Maybe we have a requirement for CAD in our organization. And you know what? We don't want to go around install CAD on different devices. Our staff are out with end users and doing different things. So we're using that Windows Virtual Desktop environment to deliver that application to them. And an example of that is to say, right, actually, here's a CAD viewer app. Previously, it was difficult for me when my end user was out on site to actually access this data. Maybe it was a 3D model, maybe it was a map, maybe it was some even GIS information or something like that. So they can easily access that application and access the data associated with that and say, yeah, here's my CAD drawings, I can work away as normal. And you know what, I can open up new files if I want. And where are those files? Well, actually, they're sitting on that same network share we saw that the finance user had earlier on in here in the engineering project. And actually, yeah, I can open up those files very, very easily. So straight away, it's giving me access to the key applications I want in a secure fashion, in a very, very controlled environment, but my end user experience is good. I didn't have to worry about a VPN connection there. I didn't have to worry about sluggish connection. I didn't have to worry about, is my laptop powerful enough to run that? All of those, I suppose, previous issues have been completely eliminated. And again, I suppose it's worth noting that this is available on all devices. So again, I can be down to the level of where, do you know what, I'm in the airport, I just have my phone with me, I have a 4G connection. Well, yeah, I can actually tap on my remote desktop app and get access to those same applications that I had before. So again, full access on mobile device, very, very easily and very, very seamlessly. And there we go. So I mentioned earlier on that security is at its core. And again, when we're thinking about our current scenario in terms of, good enough platforms, technology strategy, all of those things, it's important to remember that we're sitting on, or we've moved now to Windows Virtual Desktop, where a lot of those concerns are addressed. There is no fragmentation because it is a managed service. There is no just good enough because it's the same platform. It's a consistently upgraded platform. And in terms of legacy, well, the only legacy issue we're worried about is our actual applications. We're no longer worried about legacy infrastructure. The Windows Virtual Desktop sits on Microsoft Azure, which as of today actually has 60 regions globally. So huge breadth of expansion across the globe, which again means that I can scale wherever my users are and wherever I need to scale. Likewise, the level of certification across Microsoft Azure is second to none. There's close to 100 different certifications right now, from standard ISO, PCI, SOC certifications, right through to GDPR, EU model clauses, and various other industry standards as well. But down to a technology level, that baked in security comes with multi-factor authentication built in, a reduced attack surface because my outbound ports are no longer need to be opened. So it used to be quite common for outbound ports to be open, or outbound ports to open up, I suppose, holes into our environment. But with Windows Virtual Desktop, that gets completely eliminated, and many other things, including isolated user sessions. So to touch on things just a little bit deeper before we finally wrap up today, Windows Virtual Desktop is made up of three key components. One is the client end, our devices, the systems we're coming in on. Two is the managed service element, the piece that used to be a headache for us to manage that actually now we no longer need to worry about. So our web access controller, our gateway, our license management server, and all the databases that go around that are all put together. So from load balancing to everything else, we no longer have that headache. And all we need to worry about is actually managing our end users, managing our applications, and managing the images that our applications actually sit on. In terms of looking at traditional problems with VDI and RDS, slow logins was a huge one. Application management and installation, like I mentioned earlier on, was a big one. File shares, if I've got files there that have gigabytes of data or files that are gigabytes in size each, that created a huge headache. And video calling was completely a no-no. Well, with Windows Virtual Desktop, all of those problems are addressed because it is Windows 10, because we're containerizing our profiles, and because it's integrating with the Azure security services. It means all of those challenges are addressed. So FX Logics is one of the technologies, that sits under the hood there. And what that does is it actually containerizes our profiles. So containerizes our OST, our OneDrive cache, our search database, and makes it very, very easy for that profile to move regardless of which session host I actually land on. So as an end user, my experience is actually very, very good. And you saw from the performance earlier on when I opened up the various applications and files that it was pretty instantaneous. My experience was similar to the experience that I get if I was actually on my PC sitting in the office as normal. We're also able to take that same containerization process with applications as well and say, well, actually, we can dynamically attach the applications to the end user sessions. We actually don't need to worry about installing those applications on particular VMs or on particular session hosts. By delivering them in a containerized fashion, it means that we simply have a vanilla OS or vanilla Windows 10 environment, and dynamically we attach our profile, dynamically we attach the applications that that user has access to or that that user needs. But from a performance point of view, the end user just gets the same experience. But from an IT overhead point of view, it makes things much, much simpler. And even down to the level of files, again, we no longer need to worry about managing file servers and the headache that goes with that. And also, how do we manage the complexity of, well, we have some users who are still very much on-prem and need to use our on-prem network environment, but we also have adopted that hybrid approach where many users are still external. With Azure Files, we're able to dynamically deliver those files without the overhead of a server to manage or DFS or many of those other cumbersome file solutions that would have caused us headaches in the past. So again, it's yet another problem addressed. It's another IT resource freed up and allows that IT resource to focus on how do we make things more productive. And lastly, in terms of the Microsoft Teams experience, and specifically in terms of that video, natively built into Windows Virtual Desktop is that ability to do video handoff. So again, we're not worried about our bandwidth constraints. That video is going from peer to peer, from end user to the other end user. So we're leveraging the technology that's built in from both Teams and from Windows Virtual Desktop to do that in a dynamics fashion. So it appears that it's real time. We're no longer having those frame lags or that kind of pause or choppiness in the video. So in summary, one simple solution, multiple use cases. Again, going back to my first slide where we have a simple problem. We have end users that want to get their job done. Windows Virtual Desktop allows that to happen regardless of where those end users are and regardless of what device they're coming in on. We're getting our applications, it's consistent application or consistent experience across applications. Those updates are no longer a headache. Those different flavors of applications are no longer a worry. We're getting that business continuity benefit as well. So, you know, we've had some conversations with people where their actual starting point in Windows Virtual Desktop is through business continuity. They want it as a standby solution, but gradually they're saying, actually, do you know what, let's leverage this standby solution a little bit more. Let's slowly introduce apps and let's see what else we can do. Another question we often get asked is where do we start with this? And really we see three key areas where you can start. One is with the POC, and this is where most people start. And actually now we can do that with some Microsoft sponsorship and deliver a free POC or free Azure POC. We can also focus in on the business continuity element. And again, we see a number of businesses focusing in on that element and enhancing their DR plan to say, actually, we really want a business continuity component in here, not just a simple DR solution. And we see other businesses going, actually, do you know what, we're at a frame of mind where we're looking at our existing on-premise infrastructure. It's end of life. We don't want to go through that whole CapEx headache again, but we want the same experience. We don't want disruption to our end users. We still want that network share experience. We still want our FAT applications to work. And we're looking at that full move to the cloud with Windows Virtual Desktop and Microsoft 365. And with that, in the time we have, I suppose I'll hand it over to questions. I think there might be a few have popped in there over the course of the last half an hour or so.
Finian, thank you. Another great presentation there, and I hope the audience enjoyed it, guys. Do get your questions in the question box there. I have a few questions coming in, Finian. I guess I guess you know you've talked a lot about the solution set, the challenges posed, and you know you've talked about a couple of different scenarios. But I guess what are you seeing on the ground? What types of situations are you seeing WVD being used, and maybe can you give us some more examples of a rollout of WVD?
Yeah, I suppose I mentioned a few kind of examples there that we'd have conversations with around business continuity. I suppose thinking of two of maybe the more recent examples in the last couple of weeks. One was with an engineering company who we're working with, and they have a challenge of they have cost modeling software that right now sits on premise in a number of their branch locations. Now, when they're doing cost modeling, they actually need people on the ground, out on site with clients doing that cost modeling. The software simply doesn't work over a VPN solution. It refuses to. It's quite a number of years old. So what we've done with them is we started off with a POC, brought that software into Windows Virtual Desktop. It was the only application we were focused on at the start. We were now able to move from that POC, or we moved from that POC into a production environment whereby that application in its entirety now sits in Windows Virtual Desktop, meaning that I think it's a team of 20 use that cost modeling app across the country, can now access that from any location. There is no more VPNs. There's no, right, I have to drive back to the head office now to use this cost modeling software. They're able to use that actually out on site with the client, change costs dynamically, and I suppose give a quicker turnaround to a client. The other scenario I've seen over the last couple of weeks is actually with a finance company, and they're using some modeling software that uses a bespoke piece of software that is, I suppose, quite resource intensive. High volume of CPU usage, a high lot of RAM, but they actually don't use it on a daily basis. This is used maybe every couple of weeks, but fundamentally it needs that high performance to turn around those reports very, very quickly. So again, they have a small subset of users where right now the experience is very, very poor, but we brought that through a POC process with Windows Virtual Desktop. We've also put a lot of the rules around Azure around that in terms of, well, actually, this environment only needs to be live between 9 and 5, Monday to Friday, and we can dynamically scale that up very, very easily if they want increased demand outside of that. So those end users who needed that, I suppose, high processing power can just simply dive in, use that single app, do their modeling, build their reports on the back of it, and then they're back to business as usual when they're not using that. So they're just two examples. So I suppose specifically in the first example, that particular client wants to do more in Windows Virtual Desktop, but they're very much using or adopting almost a parallel strategy. One is looking at applications that are causing them headaches, that they just don't want to manage on premise anymore. And the second is looking at their individual teams to say, right, guys, which applications do you use? What headaches do they have? And we want to enable more remote access by bringing on more and more applications. So certainly they've started a journey where Windows Virtual Desktop will be a long-term project for them. But they're two examples.
Yeah, no, thanks a million, Finian, and really showing that the power, I suppose you can put it, you can distribute a powerful application and an extra CPU to your users wherever they are. So a very good example. I have a question in here from Tom, and he's asked, why would I choose Windows Virtual Desktops and not go with a more standard RDS solution?
Yeah, I suppose RDS has been around for a long, long time, and certainly many IT professionals will be very familiar with it. I suppose that the challenge that goes with RDS is just the management overhead. So the management of your gateway servers, your session brokers, your licensing server, your load balancers, all of that kind of fun stuff needs a high degree of management. Also the ability to really do things effectively with modern applications and with big applications can become a hassle. How do I size my session hosts? How do I set up the performance correctly? How do I know that an end user is going to land on the same session host all the time when in reality they're probably not? And also vendor support is another big factor in there. We still see a lot of vendors out there going, listen, we don't support virtualized environments. We support Windows 10 and that's it. So with Windows Virtual Desktop, we're able to say straight back to that vendor, well, do you know what, your application is on Windows 10 because it is Windows 10. It's not on a server OS that's skinned to look like Windows 10. It is Windows 10. It's sitting on infrastructure that we size in terms of the RAM, the CPU, the storage, etc. So I suppose performance will be one of the big things. Those new ways of delivering profiles and applications using the FX logics and the app attach would be another one. But fundamentally, that management overhead, the headache as to why you would want to continuously manage the nitty gritty of a remote desktop environment just really isn't practical. And again, if we look at the demands that are on IT professionals in this day and age, the more value that they can give back to the business by saying, well, actually that service is managed. We don't need to worry about that. Now we can focus back in on the things that are important, the better end user experience, the improvement of technology across the business and transformation across the business ultimately delivers much, much more value back to a business than doing things the traditional way.
Yeah, and I think we could all do with saving some time at the moment, and certainly from a management perspective. I think that rounds things off pretty well, Finney. It's a good point to finish on. So I don't see any more questions coming in, so I'm actually gonna wrap things up right here. Look, thank you very much for everyone who's tuned in today. Another great attendance and some great questions and feedback as well. We'll continue running these webinars, so please do leave us some feedback. Um, Please do leave us some feedback in the survey that's to follow this webinar. If there's any topics that you'd like us to cover, that's the best place to let us know. We're trying to make the content as responsive as possible to your needs. So any feedback greatly appreciated. That's it from me. If you want to check out our webpage, go to actionpoint.ie/academy. All our upcoming webinars, trainings, and other events are there. Great to have you all on here, and we'll see you again soon.